Responding to user interaction via events is the whole point of web apps. So each time when a user interacts with a web app, it has to respond in some way, and the whole point of that is events. We will be using events to do that. Now again, if you have closed it, so go ahead. If you've closed Visual Studio Code, you need to go ahead and say cd. You have to get into the practice app directory and not React apps. So I'm going to cd practice app, and once I'm in the directory, I'm going to say npm start, and that will start my local server development, and then I can reload and will start working. So we will be talking about events, and I want you to go ahead and take the entire thing, that is Control A, or select everything. You can either delete it, or if you want to have a future reference, go to source, create a new file. You can right click, create a new file, and say es6 arrow.js, and you can save it there. Save it and close this. I want you to delete the entire thing, and in index.js I want you to delete everything and come back here. So we will be talking about click events and everything. So let's start off with saying import React from React, and then these are your header files, and these have to be if you want to implement React and React DOM in your index.js, and this is compulsory in every file that you open, and if you want to run it, we have to put this, and we want to use these libraries. Alright, so let's make a counting app. So each time you click it, it has to increase the number of counts or decrease the number of counts accordingly. So it's like a small kind of a project, a small program which we will be doing so that we can practice React. So go ahead and say const counting app is equal to, open the brackets, and then we need a wrapper div. We'll wrap this div and let's say h1 and count, open the brackets, close the brackets, and say counts. Alright, so then let's put a button little later, and before this we need to create a count. We created a count JSX here, so we need to get something from outside of the JSX. So we'll do that. Let's go ahead and put the variable as let count is equal to 0. So this value will go here, so the count value will be 0. So let's check that. Save it. And there must be some kind of an error because we can't really see anything. Well, that's because we never rendered it. So remember what we did in the first introductory video. So unless and until you render your app, it will not be displayed on the browser because it cannot understand. So let's go ahead and render it. Const index root is equal to document dot get element by id root, and let's render this. So react dom dot render, it takes in 2 arguments. One is counting app and the other one is index root. Let's go ahead and save this, and here we go. So that's count equals to 0. Now we want to count, so we need a button which says +1, and let's do that. Button, and let's give it some attribute. The attribute for ID would be count ID. Let's close this and let's put +1 here. and save it. You can see +1 has been rendered. So let's go ahead to developer tools. So developer tools is F12 or more tools and developer tools. Here we can see that we have no errors, and go ahead to elements. In elements, you can go to body and here go to root, div h1, and you have the button ID with an attribute count ID. Let's also add a class to this. So that would be class is equal to count hyphen class. Save this and let's go ahead and see. Body div, so everything comes in the root, right? So class count class, so the class has also been added. But in React you do not say class, it's called class name. And let's go ahead and check that out. Go ahead and type React DOM elements, first link, that's DOM elements, and you can go here and see that class name is what you're supposed to use. To specify a CSS class, we need to use the class name attribute. And we can also see the other things that we can use in React as attributes. All the supported HTML attributes. These are all the supported HTML attributes, and we'll be using many of them. We just used ID, and you can see the placeholder hasn't changed. So the class name has a camel case, that's N is capital, so you need to put class name and not just class. So let's go ahead and do that. So it's class name and save it. So the class is that, and that just renders it as class and not as class name. So these are the basics, attributes and events that you need to know, and we will be counting when we press +1, the count value has to change. That's the whole point of doing this. That is the user interface working with the user and the interface, so that when we say +1, the value changes. So let's go ahead and remove this for now. We will not be using it, and we want to put a custom function, custom method to button. Let's first change the ID in a way. So let's say const count ID is equal to my ID, and we can go here, open and close the brackets, and here we can say count ID, and let's save this, and you can just see that the ID has been changed to my ID. You can go ahead and change something else, say my ID1, and save it, and that will change as well. It says my ID1 right here. Now what we want to do is, so we will be specifying a custom attribute to button for a click event. So when we click it, it has to change. That will be our custom attribute to button. So go ahead, remove this, and here we'll add a custom attribute and on click event. So when you click on it, it will trigger something, so it will fire a function. So on click, we will get a function here into this, a custom function, a custom attribute. And let's go ahead and say const space here. Alright, so const add is equal to the arrow function. Let's just log out something. Let's log out add 1 to this. Alright, so when you click it, it's going to call this and it's going to say add 1 to this. Save that, go back here, go to your console, and here when you click +1, so when you click the +1 button, it's going to call add on click add, this is the attribute. If you call this, and let's print add 1 to this. So let's go ahead and do that. It says add 1 to this, add 1 to this. n number of times. Now I want you to pause this video and do the exact same thing, but this time it has to -1 value. So button on click, it has to minus, and you'll have to call an attribute for the function. So you can pause this and do it, and then watch me do it. Okay, so I'm going to introduce another button on click is equal to minus. I'm going to call minus for this, and the button will be -1. So first let's save this and see if the button gets printed. It says minus is not defined. Alright, so let's go define minus. So const minus is equal to the arrow function console.log -1 to this. Let's say -1 from this. Alright, so now we go ahead and save it. Here we go. We get the two buttons right here, and when we fire it, it has to give us add 1 to this and -1 to this. So let's add 1 to this, and then let's -1 to this. So add 1, -1, add 1, and -1. So it goes on like that. But what we actually want to do is when we click on add 1, the count value has to change. So when I say +1, this has to add 1, and not just on the console. When I say +1, it has to add 1. When I say -1, it has to -1 value from the count. So we will be doing that in the next video.